Welcome to Musica Virtuale, a season online, presented by Gallery Concerts. Today we welcome forte pianist Jonathan Oddie to lead us into the fascinating world of musical variation, as he explores why it has been such fertile soil for great composers, complete with a performance of variations written by both Mozart and Beethoven. And now, your host for the evening, Gallery Concerts Artistic Director, Nathan Whittaker.
Hello, I'm Nathan Whittaker, the Artistic Director of Gallery Concerts. I would like to welcome you to the 4th episode of Musica Virtuale. But first, we have a few housekeeping issues. This is intended as an interactive experience, which means that you, yes, you, can and should be a part. The live chat is on the screen, so please write any questions or friendly comments that you might have for Jonathan there. After we see his engrossing performance of variation sets by Mozart and Beethoven, I will direct many of these questions directly to him. Second, please take a moment to visit galleryconcerts.org for a PDF of tonight's program, complete with Jonathan's biography and program notes. And while you are there, you could consider becoming a donor to Gallery Concerts this season. Finally, please subscribe to the Gallery Concerts YouTube channel. Not only will it make it easier for you to access our content, but it also helps us to reach a wider audience and will unlock features that will make this experience even better. This afternoon, I am thrilled to be joined by Jonathan Oddie, whom I have been privileged to know since our time together in school. He has some of the nimblest fingers I've ever seen, paired with a keen intellect and discerning musicality, placing him among the very finest of early keyboardists. Hi, Jonathan. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you for that very nice introduction, Nathan.
Well, I meant every word of it. Well, I know you well because we go way back. We're old friends. But to some of the people who might not know you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I am mainly a harpsichordist. I began my studies, as many harpsichordists do, as a modern piano student, and I went to Indiana University, where we met as a modern pianist. And there I very quickly got interested in harpsichord and historical performance and all of those associated topics. And I ended up double majoring in piano and harpsichord. And after that, I went to England and studied musicology for a while, and I specialized in Renaissance music, specifically the composer Orlando Gibbons. And I've been in the Seattle area since 2014, playing lots of different contexts. So I feel very lucky to play with some great orchestras. I sometimes play with the Seattle Symphony when they do Baroque programs. I've been playing recently with Portland Baroque and other orchestras, Northwest Sinfonietta around the area. And I play chamber music for gallery concerts and for the Salish Sea Early Music Festival. And in the past few years, I've been really delighted to kind of get back to my first love of piano repertoire through the medium of the instrument I'm playing today, the forte piano. So I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Well, we're excited to hear you and to hear you talk and to play. So we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into the fascinating world of theme and variations, or variation sets, as we like to more call it nowadays. I'm excited to sit back and learn all that you have to say.
All right, thank you. So let me just start by saying thank you to everyone for joining us for this online program of classical variations for forte piano. I love the genre of theme and variations. There are so many great examples, especially for solo keyboard, from Bird and Cavazzon in the 16th century through Bach, Brahms, and Rachmaninoff, just to name some of my favorites. So I hope that I can share some of what I find so fascinating about this genre with you today. So today's program features two very different sets of variations for forte piano. That is to say, these are piano variations, but I'm playing not on a modern piano, a modern grand piano, but on a small instrument built in the style of the late 18th century. And I'll say a little bit more about that later on. So first today, I'm going to play Mozart's 12 variations in C major on vous, dirai-je, Maman, which is the tune that we know as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And after that, you'll hear Beethoven's so-called Eroica variations in E flat, opus number 35. As I said, these are very different pieces. The Mozart is essentially showy and lighthearted and maybe a little lightweight as well. It has some moments that gesture towards something more profound and certainly some moments that are very beautiful, but it never really departs too far from this jolly mood suggested by the folk song melody. And the Beethoven is equally exuberant, maybe more so, but it is a real virtuoso piece on a much larger scale. He himself described it to his publisher as an entirely new way of writing variations. And it is much more ambitious than the Mozart in the way it brings in older techniques of counterpoint like canon and fugue into the genre of variations. Nevertheless, I think these pieces do have something in common, and that is the way that they transform a single melodic line into a real abundance of different forms. And this is what I find fundamentally so fascinating about theme and variations. And it seems to be something that is consistent across many different historical periods. I was reading about variation in Renaissance music in an article by the theorist Peter Schubert, and he quotes an anthropologist named Donald Brown who says that musical variation is something of a cross-cultural universal amongst humans, along with things like childhood fear of strangers or special types of speech for special occasions. So there seems to me to be something deeply and fundamentally interesting about musical variation, and I suspect that it appeals to the part of the mind that likes to look for patterns, underlying regularity in things that seem very different. That's certainly part of what appeals to me about it. So before talking about today's program in detail, I wanted to first describe in general what theme and variations is. So in general terms, it begins with a theme, usually a simple song or a dance tune, and that is followed by a series of pieces based on some aspect of the theme and keeping most of its shape intact while using it to create something more complex and elaborate. So the theme could be traditional, it could be something newly composed, or it could be taken from another piece. And many variations were composed and improvised on themes that were familiar to the audience, because this allows the audience to better perceive what the composer is doing and to marvel at the composer's or improviser's skill in transforming something familiar into something novel. And I emphasize improviser as well as composer because this was, among other things, a genre of improvisation. And we know that Beethoven, in the early part of his career as a piano virtuoso, dazzled audiences not only by performing composed works, but also by improvising variations on the spot. And later in his life, there are accounts from his friends where he would play a composed set of variations, and then he would continue playing when he got to the end and add improvised variations to it. So the question for a composer of variations is, what will you keep the same and what will you change from the theme when you go into the variations? So one possibility is that you might keep the harmony, the chords the same, and create variety by embellishing the melody. Another possibility is that you might keep the harmony the same, but create new melodies around that structure of chords. And a third possibility, maybe the most sophisticated, is that you could take one voice or one melodic strand out of the theme and keep that in common and weave it into new contrapuntal combinations by adding melody and harmony above and below it. Very often in this type of variations, the piece of the theme that is kept the same is not the melody, what you would hear in the right hand, but the bass, which you would hear in the left hand. And this is the strategy of J.S. Bach's Goldberg variations. So the Goldberg variations begin with this very beautiful aria. So on. And then in the remainder of the piece, the 30 variations, Bach proceeds to entirely disregard all of that wonderful ornamentation and filigree in the upper voices. And all that he really keeps constant is the bass line, which is something like this. So for instance, the first variation, perhaps hear those four notes in the very lowest notes of the left hand. And that is the thread that runs all the way through Bach's Goldberg variations. So with that in mind, I'll move on to the pieces on today's program, starting with the Mozart. When I was planning this program, I knew that I wanted to play the Beethoven Eroica variations, and I needed to choose a Mozart piece to go with them. There are many other Mozart variation sets for piano, which I listened to, and some are probably more virtuosical, more profound than this one. Most of the others are written on opera arias by well-known composers of the day, Gluck, and others who are less familiar to us now. But the one that I'll play today is unusual in being based on a folk tune, and I think this makes it distinctive in two ways. First of all, we all know the tune so well, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, that we can hear and appreciate what Mozart does with it in a way that we can't do so easily with the variations on opera tunes. And secondly, because the tune is so simple, I think this gave Mozart greater freedom in the way that he treated it, both melodically and harmonically. And I'll give you one simple example. Instead of coming down the scale of C major, which is what the tune does, he can also alter it by using chromatic notes. So he can go. And that is still recognizable because the outline is still there, even though these notes have been interpolated. So in this piece, it really is the melody, which is the thread that runs through all the variations. Sometimes it's heavily ornamented and sometimes it's concealed in the middle voice, but it almost never goes away completely. And what I love about this piece, well, one thing that I love about this piece is the way that Mozart harmonizes and reharmonizes this very simple melody. Because it's so simple, it can be harmonized in lots of different ways. Because it moves mostly up and down the C major scale by steps, one thing that you could do is to just play it in parallel thirds, which would give you this. But maybe that's a little too simple for you if you're Mozart. So what you could do, instead of having two voices move in lockstep like that, have almost the same thing, but have them move offset from each other. And then you get this very beautiful chain of suspensions, dissonances, and resolutions. So. So that is actually one of the main kind of core ideas behind Mozart's harmony in this piece. And it can be filled out in different ways by adding different bass lines to it. But it isn't always easy to hear these harmonizations in the finished piece because of all of the fast-moving figuration and ornamentation that Mozart also uses. So I thought it would be interesting to go through and hear some of them without all the decoration. Here is the version that Mozart gives us at the beginning of variations 2 and 4. It has those beautiful dissonances from the chain of suspensions, but it only uses the notes of the C major scale, which incidentally are not the white keys on this piano, but the black keys because of the materials that the keyboard is made out of. Here's that first version. In other places, Mozart enriches this harmony by adding chromatic notes either in the treble, the melody, or in the bass, or both. So here's the ending of Variation 2, for example. And here is an even more colorful version from Variation 10. A final way to vary this progression is to flip the upper parts around so that the melody goes into a middle voice and the counter melody is heard on the top. So instead of getting this, in Variation 7, Mozart inverts those and gives us this. Something else that I really like about this Mozart piece is the two variations that have a little hint of fugal imitation. That's number 8 and number 9. So that is to say, these are variations where one voice begins with part of the melody, and then other voices join in one by one, as if in a round, each one beginning with a fragment of the same melody that the first voice introduced. So just like harmonizing in thirds or harmonizing with suspensions, making a melody into a canon or a fugue is a technique which a composer might use to transform melody into harmony. And as it turns out, the melody of vous, dirai-je, Maman, or Twinkle, Twinkle, works out almost perfectly if you sing it in canon with the second voice beginning 5 notes lower, like this. It goes a little funny at the end because it ends in the wrong key, so you have to find some way of finessing that, but basically it works out. So in combination with the chain of suspensions that we already heard, This is the basic idea behind the two fugato variations, number 8 and number 9. One of them is very plain and simple, and the other is shifted into the minor key and filled in with extra notes, extra ornaments. And what I find interesting is that Mozart gives us the more complicated one first, variation number 8, which is a little miniature example of what 18th century composers would call the learned style. This is followed by the more simple and transparent number 9, which is more recognizable as the skeleton that we heard earlier. So there's much more that we could say about this Mozart piece, like the wonderful variety of figuration and ornamentation that he applies to the melody. But the harmony and the imitation are two really clever and subtle aspects, which I think are easier to hear and enjoy if you're tipped off to them in advance. So I'll move on to the Beethoven, the 15 variations in fugue in E flat, opus 35, composed in 1802. Beethoven did not title these the Eroica variations. They have gotten that name in retrospect because a year later, in 1803, he used some of the same ideas for the finale of the Third Symphony, the Eroica. Beethoven wanted to call them the Prometheus variations because he took his theme from music he composed in 1801 for a ballet titled The Creatures of Prometheus. If you know the symphony, you'll certainly recognize the theme, which in outline sounds like this. But what really is the theme of these variations? Unlike the Mozart, it is not the melody that you hear in the right hand or in the violins of the orchestra version. Instead, much as in the Goldberg variation, it is the bass line in the left hand of the piano or the cellos and basses of the orchestra. And Beethoven is more radical than Bach in that he makes it obvious to the listener that the bass is really the theme, almost as if he's laying out his compositional workshop for everyone to appreciate. So he begins, as he later does in the symphony, with the bass line alone. And after this, the opening introduction is almost like a series of counterpoint exercises, or maybe a parody of a series of counterpoint exercises in 2, 3, and then 4 voices, all dutifully marked in Italian in the score, a due, a tre, and a quattro. Not only that, but as the number of voices increases, the bass line moves up first into the middle voice and then into the top voice, almost like a cantus firmus in Renaissance music. So in the variation or the introduction part with 2 voices, the bass line remains in its rightful place, and the melody is added in the right hand. And then in the variation for 3 voices, now the bass line is in the middle and it's surrounded by extra melodies above it and below it. And then finally, in the 4-voice version, the bass line is now up at the top in the soprano voice. And then after that, we finally get the full theme as it originally appeared in the Creatures of Prometheus ballet music. So later variations also keep going with the same technique. They keep the bass line moving from voice to voice. Most obviously in the minor key variation, number 14, in the first phrase that bass line is in the melody. And then in the second phrase, it goes back into the bass. So on. In the Mozart variations, as I mentioned, there are little touches of contrapuntal or learned style in the 2 imitative variations. But Beethoven goes much further with this aspect by incorporating a real canon and a full-blown fugue finale. And this could suggest influence from Bach's Goldberg variations, although it's not clear that Beethoven knew them when composing this piece. They were in print around this time, but it may be that he got acquainted with them later. Anyway, in variation 7, he has a canon at the octave, which means that the left hand imitates the right hand almost all the way through 1 octave lower, like this. even though I think Beethoven takes the use of counterpoint in these variations more seriously than Mozart did in K265, this is still a very funny and humorous canon, maybe almost a little bit of a parody. Halfway through it, he gets sick of the canonic imitation and he pounds out some fortissimo chords for the first part of the B section before returning to the canon as if nothing had happened to close the variation. But there is nothing parody-like about the fugue that ends this, the grand finale following variation 15. He uses the first 4 notes of the bass line to generate the subject. And then halfway through the fugue, he also inverts the subject. He turns it upside down like this. And so on. And then the climax of the fugue dissolves into a return of the theme, first simplified and then lavishly embellished with trills and runs. And to my ears, this almost looks forward to some of the very final variations that Beethoven composed in his late sonatas, opus 109 and 111. Just a word about the instrument. This is an instrument built in the style of the late 18th century maker Johann Andreas Stein. It has a very light action. It has the same number of keys as a late Baroque harpsichord, 5 octaves from F to F. So pianos with heavier actions and larger compasses were being already made in London in the 1790s. But Beethoven limited the range of his published works to this kind of instrument up until the Waldstein Sonata, opus 53, composed 1 year later in 1804. So that means that these variations from 1802 are among the last that Beethoven published that fit within the range of the classic 18th century Viennese fortepiano. To me, this piano feels very well suited to Mozart, and in truth, perhaps a little small and light for the demands of this Beethoven piece. But I find that that gives me a very visceral sense of how Beethoven pushes the limits of what the instruments can do. Thank you once again for joining us today. I'll look forward to your questions and comments in the discussion afterwards. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoy this performance of piano variations by Mozart and Beethoven.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. What a tremendous, tremendous performance. Bravo, Jonathan. And I'm clearly not the only one out there who thinks so. From what I see you guys writing, I'm going to bring Jonathan back in now. Jonathan, congratulations. What a tremendous, tremendous performance you've offered to us today.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Thank you.
Um, I just want to share with you a few things that people have said out there. Um, uh, our good friend Libby Phelps. Hi, Libby. Nice to see your face. Bravo, Peter Clark. Brilliant. Libby again. Some emoji that looks to have hearts around it. I think that's a good thing. Carl Gutierrez, very cool. And here from Carolyn Wallace, so moving, tears in my eyes. Thank you, Jonathan. So
Carolyn.
I think we're we have more of thank you for this marvelous virtuosic performance from Sky King. Thank you for a fabulous performance from Martha. Hi, Martha. Nice to see your name out there. And from a well, let's see. We'll come back to that one. There we go. From a Miriam Oddie. Perhaps you know her. Refined and expressive playing. What a virtuosic instrument the forte piano is. These pieces are so different, but both sound wonderful on it. And I absolutely agree. And one more from our friend John Lenti. Oddie, whoa! So there's you have quite a following out there. A lot of people who really enjoyed that, including myself. I have a question that I have to ask right off the bat, which is
Please.
These Eroica variations. I have to admit that I'm not. I didn't really know these very well before you said that you were going to present these for us. You know, of course, I know the Moonlight Sonata and the Waldstein Sonata and all these great piano pieces of Beethoven. Why is this not doesn't get? Why do you think this one doesn't get the recognition that it so deserves?
I don't know. I'm really not sure how well known it is among pianists or really among lovers of the piano. I don't think it's obscure exactly, but
Sure.
I think there's just, as you say, there's so much great Beethoven music for the piano that maybe people focus on those, especially the sonatas are such a Bible of the pianist. And I think also because he wrote the, as one of his final piano works, the Diabelli variations, which dwarfs even this piece. I think that's the one that people tend to think of when they think of
Sure.
Beethoven and variation form.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing that struck me every time listening to this is, you know, we often think of Beethoven as this very serious composer with very real things. And my gosh, there was a fugue in a variation set. You can't get any more serious than writing a fugue and a canon in a variation set. But then there's just moments in here that are just absolutely just gut-busting humorous.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
kind of amazing how Beethoven is able to experience such a gamut of emotions in these pieces.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting combination of great seriousness in a sense in the craft and the kind of intellectual rigor with which he put it together with these contrapuntal experiments with, as you say, a very humorous kind of emotional content for the most part. And then, of course, with moments of great poignancy as well in some of the slower movements.
Absolutely. Well, there's a few questions in here I'd like to throw
Sure.
your way. Well, first of all, I want to put what Martha said up here. This takes me back to her I don't know if it was so distant, Martha, when she used to play this, although not decidedly as well. Lots of good vibes coming from Tuasen.
So I think I saw that that was for the Mozart, I think.
Yes.
And I was going to maybe mention that it was actually, I think this was one of the first kind of serious pieces of classical music that I played as a piano student as well. I think after I had played some of the Bach Little Preludes, this was maybe the first Mozart that I played. So it's a real delight to come back to it after all the intervening time.
Sure. Well, our first question comes from Sky King. Um, what is the tuning of this instrument, and were you operating the pedal with knee levers?
Yes. To take the second question first, yeah, the damper raising mechanism is a knee lever, so it is operated by the leg, but not in the same way as a pedal. It actually takes surprisingly little time to get used to that difference. So yeah, that is the pedal. Some fortepianos actually had a split pedal where you could operate half of it. You could unmute just the treble or just the bass. This one doesn't have that mechanism. It just lifts all the dampers. And then the tuning, it's tuned to A430, so a little bit flat of modern concert pitch, sort of a standard for classical period performance, I think. So I apologize to anyone with perfect pitch who suffered because of that. And it's tuned in a mild unequal temperament, not anything very far from equal temperament.
Excellent, excellent. And we also had another one also from Sky King about the knob in the center above
Oh
the
yeah.
keys.
Well, the primary function of the knob is to really get in my way when I'm trying to do the hand crossing stuff. That's the main thing it does. No, but its function, it's called the moderator stop, and it pulls a fragment of felt between the hammers and the strings. So it just changes the sound from this, a very bright sort of native sound of the instrument, to this, just a little bit more muted. Um, Again, some pianos of a slightly later design actually have a lever to operate that with your knee, or a pedal to operate it with your knee, but this one is an early design, so it has a hand stop. It has a little bit of the same function as the una corda pedal in providing a contrast of timbre. There were pianos that had both una corda and moderator stops, and have a profusion of pedals to operate all of those. But this one just has the hand-operated moderator stop.
Yes. Martha also wrote, one of the advantages of these online concerts is that we can see your hands so clearly. And what I was noticing, especially watching your hands so clearly, is how light this action is.
Yeah.
Is that a blessing or a curse?
It's both. It's a real double-edged sword. Yeah. So the light action, to me, it feels even lighter than a harpsichord. A modern piano has some resistance to the action because of the weight of the mechanism, and a harpsichord has resistance to its action because it's a plucking instrument, and so you can feel the resistance of the pluck. This has a very, very light action, the instrument that comes closest to it is a clavichord, I think, which was the sort of instrument that was the spiritual precursor of the piano in some ways. Yeah, so it absolutely makes certain kinds of passage work easier to play because it is lighter, and it also makes it easier to ghost and hit notes you don't intend to. So there's pluses and minuses to that.
Right, right. Our friend John Gordon Hill. Hi, John. Nice to see your face. And I like the cookies you posted on Facebook the other day. He says amazing playing, showcasing the instrument's finest characteristics. And he also asks a question about your piano. Who built the piano? And I'm guessing he wrote this before you explained your moderator stop. Does it have an una corda? And maybe for people out there who don't know what the una corda is,
Oh, sure.
you could just explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so the una corda is the mechanism which on a modern grand is on the left pedal, and it actually operates by shifting the entire action of the piano over, so that instead of hitting 2 or 3 strings, the hammers only hit 1. Excuse me. Yeah, and so una corda literally means 1 string. This piano has 2 strings for each key. Other pianos at this period have 2 strings for some and 3 strings for others. And then the una corda mechanism alters the sound by shifting the whole mechanism to only hit 1 of them. Yeah, so this piano does not have that. It only has the moderator for variety of timbre. It was built, I know rather little about it. It was built from a Zuckman harpsichord instrument kit. And the name on the soundboard says William L. Alva of Columbia, Missouri, 1991. And I know very little about the builder apart from that. So if anyone out there in YouTube land has more information, I'd be delighted to find out who built the instrument.
Sometimes those are the most interesting and best ones, are ones that have that the ability to make a movie about its origin story.
That's right.
It's your next pandemic project. Although hopefully we won't have too many of those remaining. I want to share what Carl said, that he was thoroughly enjoying this, Jonathan. And if you ever create a podcast series, you have a subscriber in him. And I agree, you're a fabulous teacher and an even better musician. So I want to thank you again for joining us today. Charles Caldwell. Hi, Charles. Wow, beautiful and impressive. Oh, we do have one more question, just under the wire from a lute player named John Lenty. Is the moderator stop ever explicitly indicated in music?
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I can't say that I have seen it indicated, but that doesn't mean that there isn't the possibility. I do remember one of my professors at Indiana, who was a fortepiano player as well as the modern pianist, used to say that he worried one day we would come across a letter from someone and they would say, well, I had to practice without annoying the neighbors, so I had to turn on the moderator stop. And we would find out it was actually just a practice device.
It was just a practice mute.
I don't think that's the case. I think that was a joke. But
Yes.
as far as I know, it's not explicitly indicated. But I would be interested to know otherwise if anyone else knows.
That would be quite the find to find out that it was just a neighbor. Yes, just to be kind to your neighbors. Well, I'll just share this one last from Pink Bikester. Is that Sarah? I can't tell from the picture. But while you were playing, a rainbow came out. And that's very nice. I think that perfectly sums up the hour that we've had. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Jonathan. And
thank you,
we look forward to having you back again. And if you launch that podcast series, let us all know. You'll have at least 2 subscribers.
All right.
Yeah. And John Lenty is excited that he just stumped you. So you guys can have a conversation about that later.
And well done, John.
Have a wonderful evening, Jonathan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all.
And many thanks to all of you out in cyberspace for spending part of your day with us. Before we depart, I would like to bring your attention to the remaining events this season. In April, organist extraordinaire Wyatt Smith takes us on a tour inside an early Baroque-style organ and performs music of Buxtehude, Scheidt, Tunder, and Bach. And finally, in May, I will discuss the evolution of the cello from an accompaniment instrument to its role as featured soloist. Please visit galleryconcerts.org for more information on the season, as well as to watch our previous Musica Virtuale episodes featuring Thomas Carroll, Caroline Nicolas, and Marc Destrubé. May the springtime come soon to us all, and the pollen stay out of our noses. Please take care and stay safe. We look forward to seeing you next time.